are the best Yu-Gi-Oh decks post the December 9th, 2024 ban list. Big dog, I have constructed a tier list to talk to you guys about some of the most powerful decks in the game and every strategy affected by the ban list. Let's go ahead and jump on in. Come on, guys, don't act like you don't do it. What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Chat, I feel like a rock star when I do that. I go, Today, like I said before, we are going to be talking about the best Yu-Gi-Oh decks post the December 9th ban list. But of course, as per usual, I have criteria. The criteria for this tier list is that I have put some of the best decks in the game. Decks that have topped consistent YCSs over the last format, as well as strategies that were all affected by the ban list. I'm going to be ranking these decks based on the strength of how powerful they are to win at the highest level of events. I think that it's really important to note the highest level of events. While some strategies may be down and get a new ban list or need help, I think that those strategies could compete under certain circumstances, like a new ban list or getting new help. No, but in all seriousness, these are the strategies that I think are going to be the strongest at the highest level of an event. And as usual, I can't wait for the next major event to come around so we can see what I got right. And of course, what I got right, because I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong. Big dog, I'm just like your ex-girlfriend. I'm never wrong. You're the wrong one. Except I'm actually never wrong, right?
Not this time.
Nah, I do be wrong and I be admitting it, guys. But let's go ahead and start off with this tier list and actually start with a strategy that I was wrong about. I nominated Centurion as a top 5 meta deck multiple times throughout the course of my Yu-Gi-Oh career. And every single time, it's like you're a father watching your oldest child do ballerina or cheerleading. You're supportive, but you got a football body, dog. You want just a little bit more, and sometimes you don't get it. And oftentimes, that's actually okay. A bit of a life lesson, not getting exactly what you want is a part of life. And accepting things or people for who and what they are is incredibly important. That's when you start to see the best potential out of people. So no, I'm not disappointed in my son picking soccer over football. But I am disappointed in Centurion only being a potentially dangerous deck. I think one of Centurion's biggest problems is it going second into already established boards. Unfortunately, the new Yugioh and Malice decks do not help this strategy's case. And the counter decks to those particular strategies are running 23 hand traps. Centurion can play around 2 with a skilled player, but 3 becomes incredibly hard, especially considering Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is now a top contending trap card. Hand trap, trap card, same thing at this time. While I still do think that Centurion Primera can tap into its potential, just like how I think that my youngest son can be a football star, only time will tell. Especially if I can deflate all his soccer balls or something. Maybe I'll get him back into football. Next is Snake Eyes. You have ran the format for way too long, Snake Eyes. You are no longer in the serious contention category. Unfortunately, though, I still think that Snake Eyes can be dangerous. Hear me out, guys. What Snake Eyes lost was original Sinful Spoils. Okay, granted, that's huge for Snake Eyes being able to bridge itself into other fire decks. But what did Snake Eyes lose? Seriously, sit there and think. What did Snake Eyes lose? Almost absolutely nothing. You can even play Snake Eyes as a mean of Fiendsmith Kashtira, and it will still be a good deck. The problem here is that Konami won't do enough to hit Snake Eyes, but fortunately enough, it was already on its way out on YCS Anaheim. I think that this deck will be pretty good at a regional level, but not as great at a YCS level because it did lose one of the powerful things about it, and that was mixing with other fire Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Now, Dragon Rollers, all of them just came off the ban list. They gotta be contenders, right? Dragon Rulers are a serious threat to the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, if this was 12 years ago. I think while the deck is really fun and can be used as an engine with other strategies, it definitely needs a new ban list, specifically cards like Galaxy Tomahawk off the list for the deck to compete. But if that were to happen, it would probably just be a worse Link deck. It's kind of crazy how things have sped up past Dragon Rulers, because back in the day, I remember when this deck was stupid strong. Or was it just Super Rejuvenation and Vanity's Emptiness? I don't know. I have selective memory sometimes. Goblin Bikers, the big boys, the Chabungas, the Exceed Killer. I think that this deck will be incredible against Yugioh. But against some of the other decks in the meta, there's some question marks, considering that none of the other decks are necessarily Exceed based, and that's one of the biggest things that Goblin Biker has going for it. I think that the deck will still be strong, but I'm not sure how it would play going second against some of the other decks into the format, which are also very strong themselves. Even if we were to say that Yugioh becomes a tier 0 type Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, one thing that the other deck that competes against tier 0 has is that it has something really special about it that allows you to be able to combat the other decks. Goblin Bikers don't have that just yet, but may get it in Supreme Darkness. I'm gonna say that this deck is potentially dangerous. It is the Yugioh Clapper, Big Smacker, but against some of the other strategies, it's a lot more fair. Moving on to Runic Stun. Oh my god, guys. Listen here, man. Losing Jowgen the Spiritualist, that's a board breaker Yu-Gi-Oh card if people wasn't paying attention. I don't think that Runic Stun necessarily changes much of a position anyways though. But the bad thing about it is that Runic Stun is only really good in a format where there's only one top tier Supreme deck, and this deck is a natural counter to it. I'm gonna put it in needs help. And by needs help, I don't necessarily think that Runic Stun needs help. I think that the players playing Runic Stun need a little bit of help. Fiend Smith. It is now considered a pure Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Big dogs, we have seen Fiend Smith become one of the atrocious monsters in the format. I'm gonna say it's a serious contender. El Serio del Contendero. Arriba! What Fiend Smith has going for it is multiple things. It can be any different deck that it wants to be at any given time. It can be Unchained, it can be Kashchira, it can be pure, and it can be Magical Musketeer, which is close as pure as you're gonna get. The versatility does make it powerful. I think that this is a top tier Yu-Gi-Oh engine, and unfortunately, you're gonna have to pick up those engravers again. You probably should have did it a little while ago though, like when I told you to. Lunalights did get a Lunalight Tiger to 3 big dog, and that makes Lunalights one of the best decks to get a new ban list. Lunalight Tiger is a pretty good Yu-Gi-Oh card. It's actually one of the best cards that Lunalight has in the arsenal. And seeing that it is a pendulum card, being able to loop it back and continuously special summon monsters is great, until you start to realize that some of the other decks in the format can special summon just as much with less effort, which is unfortunate. Overall though, Lunalights were never a top contention Yu-Gi-Oh deck by themselves. They were always an engine inside of other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Lunalight as an engine. Exodia! Obliterate! This deck is probably the best stun deck available. The reason why I say stun is because Secret Village of the Spellcasters is golly. But there is something that I do want to talk about, which is going to apply to the entire tier list. Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter is a very powerful card against graveyard reliant decks. But see, that's the problem. Out of all of the top Yu-Gi-Oh decks, the only deck that's reliant in the graveyard right now is Fiend Smith. And seeing that deck can be an engine most of the time, it's not necessarily reliant on the graveyard. This means that while Shifter is a good card, it's a bad card because it's going against decks that also can play Shifter. That right there in itself devalues the presence of Shifter, which allows graveyard decks to come back into the game. You guys gotta walk with me. Hold on, follow this diagram. Shifter good, decks good against Shifter, Shifter no good. Shifter no good, decks that Shifter good against also good. It's a really confusing triangle, but that is something that Exodia did have in its arsenal as one of the stun strategies. It is a really confusing 4-step square that goes on and on again, but unfortunately that was one of the biggest allures to playing Exodia. Also, fortunately enough, that's not the only allure. Exodia Incarnate is crazy. I think that this deck is still potentially dangerous. I think Malice actually has the highest ceiling over every tier 1 Yu-Gi-Oh deck right now. And the reason why is because of the OCG, because of both of the Molcharmy cards alongside of Maxi. It was really hard to get a gauge on it. In the OCG, combo decks typically don't do as well. But in the TCG, since we don't have that problem, Malice is a serious threat. And I think players are just experimenting and finding out how powerful it is. Now, I just so happen to have made a deck profile on Malice that if you want to go ahead and check out, you'll be helping Cali. It gives you a great introductory on how Malice works and how the deck can be especially deadly, layering its interruptions and making hand traps look stupid. And again, the best thing about this is that the deck is not even finished yet. We don't have a finalized cook build that says this is the best deck or the best version of Malice, go ahead and play with it, and it's still topping. Yugioh has also submitted itself as a Serio Contendero. This is the first time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history where we get a deck build set where immediately 2 of the 3 strategies are ridiculously strong. so strong they take up most of the top seats inside of a huge event. The last time we had a set like this that made that type of impact was the Secret Forces almost 10 years ago. That is completely ridiculous. And I hope that that continues on with these type of deck build sets, introducing 2 to 3 new decks inside of the format that can be crazy good. I love the philosophy. We'll probably talk about it in a video. But if anyways, I had to order these Yu-Gi-Oh decks right now, I would say that hands down, Yugioh is the deck to beat. Malice is probably going to be the best deck of the format at some point in time, and Fiendsmith is not lagging. It's not slacking. It's right there, and it's about to be macking. It's one of the crazier strategies in the game, but where I would put Fiendsmith Unchained. Now, a lot of people think that the Unchained version of Fiendsmith is not as good, and the main reason is because you sacrifice hand traps to be able to establish the board that you want with Unchained. Unchained has a natural ability to be able to play going second, break boards and establish his own, and is also really good against most cantraps, not Molchummy Frolers. I hate that card, man. I think it would probably be better off calling Unchained as a Fiend Pile Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but one thing that I really do admire about this strategy is that it plays really good into Yugioh. Destroying your Unchained cards only allows you to go further. It also does a great job against cards like Abyss Dweller and Dimension Shifter. It's one of the most skilled Yu-Gi-Oh decks in the game, and you'll start to see that Fiend Pile is actually crazy good and really malleable, depending on how you decide to make the deck. Cards like Triple Tactics Thrust are starting to become really good, and this is one of the few decks that can take advantage of it. Now, Chimera has a few things going for it. One, it is probably the best deck to play Azamina in. Possibly. Those Azamina cards just so happen to be illusion monsters, which can be fused off with your Chimera cards, but also can provide protection for your Chimera plays. 2, this is probably the best deck to play Fiendsmith in if you're not playing pure Fiendsmith or Fiendsmith Pile. Because the Fiendsmith are Fiend cards, not only can this deck easily get into it, but the fusion possibilities with this deck are completely endless. The next thing is that this is also another one of the decks to play one of the most menacing cards in the game, Chaos Angel. That's actually something that Yugioh has not been able to beat. They don't play Yugioh whole. You summon Chaos Angel and you win. I think that Chimera is pretty good, and I like that it takes a board breaker approach, because a lot of times when you're playing against some of the top decks, hand trapping them doesn't do enough. I'm gonna put it in potentially dangerous. Now, Chimera doesn't have the accolades to say that it is one of the top table decks, but it does have the potential. If coming into this format it does nothing, it's pretty much a lost cause of a Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But if Yugi has ever taught me something about anything, is that when you're down and out and people count you out the most, that's when you shine the brightest. Tenpai Dragon has received some huge hits, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I was coping. I even attempted to make a deck profile for Monday of Tenpai Dragon. To be honest, guys, my old Tenpai Dragon deck actually applies here. You can use that deck, and it's ridiculously successful. The new version was pretty much that, except for a couple of more cards, like Dino Wrestler Pinkertops, and extra burners to be able to get into your rank 7 combos, allowing you to go full Tenpai combo for free. It basically means that I still think that there's something there for Tenpai Dragon. Yes, losing both Chandra and Sengen Kaiman are huge, but at the same time, seriously, think about it, guys. You only need one to resolve. I think that Tenpai Dragon is still in needs help. It's not a bad Yu-Gi-Oh deck by any means. It's still a cheap, pretty decent, budget competitive Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But unfortunately, you can't herp derp summon Chandra and win the game anymore. It's not as it used to be, which is the biggest appeal for Tenpai Dragon to a lot of players. Next is Herald, because we got Eva to 2. Drytron's making it out of the hood with this. I'm gonna put it in needs help. Hey, yo, that's out of the hood. Let's be fair, last ban list, we wouldn't even been talking about Herald. We probably would have talked about Drytron, but not Herald. Eva at 2 allows Drytron to be able to play Herald of Orange Light a little bit better to help combat Bestials and DD Crows, which we'll pick up into the format, but I'm not 100% sure if that is enough to allow Drytron Herald to be able to thrive in this format. I mean, after all, we're in a Yu-Gi-Oh format where our opponent can make plenty of points of interaction as opposed to summoning 1-2 cards when this deck was prawn. I think Yubel is also in a needs help situation. Getting opening of the Spirit Gates was actually a pretty big for them, but at the cost of losing 2 Phantom Yubel, that's sick. I actually would have been perfectly fine and on board were we able to have 2 Phantom Yubel instead of 1, but only having 1 copy of that fusion card brings into question, should we even play this deck going forward? I mean, we're playing a ton of brick-like Yu-Gi-Oh cards just to summon a Phantom Yubel that we can only use once. It can't even fusion summon and recycle itself back into the deck. really makes you question Yugioh from here on out. I don't think it'll be a bad deck. I just think that a lot of players will shift away from it because what's the point? Now here's gonna be one of my bold takes, guys. My boy Harrison, shout out to you, big dog, has told me that the meme team, Memento, is the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Players don't know how to play it. Harrison, I love you, man. You bring heart, passion, you bring strength to the game. I think you're wrong in that department, big dog, but I do think that this deck is really, really good. Mementos have moved away from Fiendsmith and have actually been embracing Goblin Biker with Goblin Biker Grand Entrance. This is a deck that if you do learn how to play and master fairly well, it's incredibly good. And the best thing about it is that Shifter is perceived to not be inside of the format. It's also topped, I think, just about every major event to last format. Kind of crazy. Thunder Dragons just got Thunder Dragon Colossus to 3. And nobody cares. I'm sick right now. No one cares. It reminds me of that time when you come home as a kid with a picture, and your parents doesn't even put the picture on the refrigerator or anything. You worked hard on that picture. You deserve the recognition. Rescue Ace is going to be another one of my bold takes. It did lose the Snake Eyes engine, but it did gain Airlifter. I'm going to put it in the top tables, though I will try to keep my copium together for this deck. I think one of the biggest problems for Rescue Ace is that if the opponent is playing 23 hand traps, oftentimes they're going to use a lot of hand traps. And almost like the Centurion situation, this deck can play around 2. But 3? Oh my God, what are we doing? Like, bro, come on. I think cards like Emergency and SP Little Knight will allow you to resolve Turbulence a little bit more often. But if your opponent starts using Effect Veiler on your Airlifter and you don't have Emergency, you could. Labyrinth has put itself in a position to be one of the best decks in the games, hands down. Dimensional Barrier for the decks that Synchro, Fusion, and Exceed, and Simul Archfiends for the Link decks. But one of the better stories that I want to talk to you guys about Labyrinth is that it can make Chaos Angel, which again, I said is going to be a factor in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Ryzeal just simply can't beat it. But also, this deck can go back to playing the Virus cards, and I think the Virus cards have a really big chance at being good. Deck Devastation Virus destroys all monsters with 1500 or less attack in the opponent's hand and for the next 3 turns. What is the attack of over 90% of the hand traps in the game? That's all I'm saying, guys. I think that Labyrinth does have the opportunity to be one of the best decks in the game, but only time will tell. It's disappointed at the last YCS. Hopefully it can pick up the slack in the upcoming one. After further delegation with the Mermail fam, the Atlantean Kings, the members of the Trident, I think that Mermail is also a top table Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. The only reason why I said that this deck was lower in ranking is because of Shifter. But if I'm going to talk about how Memento and Rescue Ace and Unchained are better Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks in the format because of less Shifter, then obviously Mermail becomes one of the stronger decks in the game too. This was another deck that was represented pretty well, and players have figured out how to make this deck go. It's really exciting. Now, Performapals or Pendulums. Best deck, let's go! Okay, let's be honest, guys. Trips don't even talk about you anymore. Even with Monkey Board at 2, you get a new ban list, bro. I think it's time that we just ignore Pendulums until at least Heavy Metal Foes Electromite comes off the list in some capacity. If we don't get that, then any other Pendulum unhit is almost unnoticeable. I think that Fire Kings are still potentially dangerous. I actually just so happen to have a deck profile playing the Pure version, and Pure is still really, really good. It's almost like it lost exactly nothing. My only problem with this deck is that sometimes it could be a little bricky, just a little bit. I ain't gonna lie, when my opponent Veilers my Volcanics, I cry a little. Voiceless Voice, I think, has shown its chops to be one of the best decks. The crazy thing about Voiceless Voice, Rescue Ace, Memento, and even Unchained, and Labyrinth, I think all of these decks can incorporate Ultimate Slayer a little bit easier than some of the other decks on this tier list. That's really, really important because it's good against Fiendsmith, Malice, and Ryzeal. But Voiceless Voice just so happens to take it to a whole nother level. Voiceless Voice is going to be a pretty good deck in the upcoming format. Dinos, guys, we got Pankratops to 3, but we didn't get Misk. So yeah, I of course I'm asking for a new ban list, and I don't care that Sanguine Summoning is at 1-2.
It's a field spell.
I think that Kashtira is also one of the top contenders. Of course, I think Kashtira Fiendsmith is probably the best because it allows you to play around cards like Dimension Shifter and Abyss Dweller a little bit more easier, but even the pure Kashtira was making its rounds and topping at the higher events. Kashtira Unicorn is one of the most dominant forces of the game and takes advantage of players not playing enough cards in their extra deck. It is incredibly strong. And Dark World's got the danger cards, but the only thing dangerous about Dark Worlds is a new ban list. Look, man, in order for this deck to be competitive right now, I think it's going to need the Firewall Dragon pre-errata, all of the danger cards, no hand traps in the game, and you need to win the dice roll every single time, and it still might not do it. I'm just messing, guys, but unfortunately when it comes to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, I don't think that Dark Worlds stand a chance at the highest level of events, even with the danger cards coming off the list. And lastly is Zodiac. Zodiac Barrage means nothing. Though once we get Dryden and Barrage, I'm pretty interested to see how Tri-Brigade would do or how Zodiac would do as an engine. And that's all that I got for the best Yu-Gi-Oh decks post the December 9th ban list. I want you guys to let me know, what do you think about these Yu-Gi-Oh strategies? Did I rank one too high? Did I rank one too low? But of course, what are the strategies that I forgot? As always, big dog, I hope you're having an amazing day, and be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.